Today on the Cameron Journal podcast, I am joined by Joseph Gelet. He is the author of Investors Guide to Legal Insider Trading. I'm very interested to figure out how this is going to work. Um, he's been a Wall Street veteran for 25 years. He is high finance. He's the people that wear suits and ride around in Mercedes going to big tall buildings in New York. And as someone who's spent most of my working career writing about the 2008 financial crisis and economics. And we have a great investment business, economics business at the Cameron Journal. The minute I saw this one, I wanted to grab him. So we're going to find out all about this and how all of this works and more esoteric ways that Wall Street has come up to separate us from our money. So welcome to the Cameron Journal podcast, Joe. How are you?
Thank you. Great. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So why don't you let's just dive right into the deep end of the pool. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your book?
Okay. I was always interested in markets. I started out day trading with my dad, got me into it when I was a kid. And in the 90s, it was really easy to day trade. So it was a very bad learning lesson because everyone was making money just by guessing. And then the dot-com bubble collapsed, and then it wasn't easy to do. So I started trading currencies, and I did that for 20 years, and that was really, really good. It was fun, and I'm a technology guy, so I developed algorithms to trade currencies, and I did that. And then I got basically regulated out of a job by the Wall Street guys that drive Mercedes and wear suits. So I had to find something else to do. I wanted to open a bank, and basically they raised the requirements. You needed $100 million to participate in the currency market. So they made it difficult for most people. So I started doing venture capital. I got a Series 7 license, and that's what I've been doing since then is matching buyers and sellers in private markets. And it's something before I started doing this, I knew nothing about. But I've learned that this is where most wealth creation happens. So I've learned, for example, I've seen how some of these billionaires have started from nothing and worked their way through this system to become wealthy. And um, of course, as you referenced, it's a little bit unfair system, but the good news is anybody, it's open, so it's not like you have to know someone to be able to do this. If you have the knowledge of how to do it, anybody can do it. Um, and that's what I decided to write a book that it's kind of like a guidebook for anyone who wants to get into investing. You don't even need any money to start. You just need to start saving, basically. And I have a part in the book just on saving. Like if you have zero money, you have to get a job and save your money, which is not easy, but it's possible. So there's no requirements to do this. A lot of people that have become successful have started from nothing, but it does require time and hard work, and it's not easy, but it's not all luck either. So that's the good news. So the business is really successful, and I want to get into more education and kind of to give back and help people because I get lots of questions in my job like how does this work, how does that work? So I wanted to um, explain some of the inner workings and demystify it a bit.
Yeah, it's kind of no, that's very good. I feel you on the Forex thing. I was a currency trader years ago, which where I was living at the time met every Sunday at 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
When the markets opened. That was a must be in front of computer moment. And I was fortunately probably never as good at it as you were. I was able to do some pretty hot trades that were pretty awesome, sort of thing. Um, but there are so many things that affect it for me, like the level of research is just like the amount of reading you have to do to understand currency markets is a little crazy.
Yeah,
Like,
it's a
you
full-time
know,
job.
yeah, no, one press release from a central bank that's millions or billions of dollars made or lost,
Yeah.
in a single press release. Um, and I particularly enjoyed doing the dollar yen pair. So I was always like, what are those? What's the BOJ up to today? Like it's,
Yeah.
I spent a good about 2.5 years living in fear of the Bank of Japan. And so yeah, that's there was a whole craze in that for a while that's really died down. There was a lot of independent platforms that were coming along and that really has kind of died off in the last little while. So
Well, yeah, and this kind of ties into why I wrote this book because what it was, and I guess this is true in most industries. You've got some 10 banks control the Forex market, and
yeah,
they decided they wanted to destroy all these new platforms and all the competitors. So it's basically like a monopoly. So they created the Dodd-Frank regulations, and they basically, like for example, in 2000, when you were probably trading, there were 300 or 400 Forex brokers in the United States, and now there's two.
yeah. No, I
And
mean, so I was doing this in 2010, 11, and a little bit of 12.
yeah, it was just
And
before the regulation. So it was, yeah,
yeah, there was kind of a real renaissance of it happening and all this type of thing. And I started out day trading with my dad as well. In fact, I remember, here's how old I am. I remember when decimalization for stocks came through. When I
yeah,
started, you could have, 9 6, IBM is at 916 a quarter. And in
yeah,
2000, we switched to decimalization and
yep,
everything was in even to the penny. So yeah, that was yeah, and so it was. I started out in the same way, but I'd never traded currencies before. I mean, I knew you could, but I had never done it. So I really had to like learn that whole business and everything. And it was I was sad when they got rid of spot silver and spot gold because you could make i- good amounts of money on small movements in precious metals. Um, and they shut that business down. And I'm kind of like,
yeah,
I'm not surprised. The gold and silver people want those prices to remain fairly stable. They don't want, millionaires made because the price of gold moved ever so slightly in the right direction. So
yeah.
I'm not surprised about that. But yeah, I was wondering kind of what had happened. So major market consolidation Forex. We went from many, many, many down to nobody, basically.
Yeah, yeah. If you want to call it a consolidation, I would call it a racket. So what it is that, like, if you send money to the UK, you're paying 10%
Right.
to JP Morgan and these guys. So they just, I mean, the FIFO rule, you know about FIFO, you have to enter the trades in the same order which you exit.
Yes.
So all of these rules, no hedging, no leverage, it just killed the US market. And I have friends that went overseas. You can still make money trading in Australia and other places, but in the United States, they made any strategy just not work. So they basically killed the market. And now if you want to trade, you have to go to Gain or Oanda, and they're not really good brokers. So no one's
Yeah.
making money. So yeah, it kind of died down. And
No, I mean, the most of the broker I started with wasn't even American. They were from Spain. Like all the good Forex brokers were all European or Australian.
right, yeah,
Like, yeah, they are. But I mean, at the same time, though, they've had legalized sports betting on every corner in Europe for decades, and we're just now kind of sort of beginning to allow sports betting ish in some
yeah.
places. So it's a different culture. It's a different culture. But so moving forward to venture capital, that's very interesting. I have the next evolution of my life now that I'm kind of leaving, starving artists behind in favor of, artists with money, is to get into the whole, invest. I love investing in business I think have promise. So, I love doing like main invest where you can invest in coffee shops, dispensaries. I did a dispensary in Massachusetts that was really great, all this type of thing. I do fractional real estate with ground floor, which has been a great business. I hope they're going to IPO here soon because we'll all do very well for ourselves. Um, and all this type of thing. How does one get into investing in this manner?
That's what I offer with my company. It's Venture Capital Cross. I have a online portal, and I'm trying to offer diversity. So most investing is companies that people are familiar with, like SpaceX, Stripe. But you can do earlier stage investments. We did a crowd fund for Gab. Have you heard of Gab? It's a free speech
Mhm.
alternative to the big
Yep.
social media. So Gab did a crowdfunding campaign, which is for retail investors. You could invest $300 in Gab. And then as Gab's equity grows, your equity grows. So that's one way to get into it is just invest. Another way is to start a business and raise money. You know, it's there's two sides of it. But
Right.
basically, the venture capital is just startups and small businesses is really what it is. And then
No,
as they
that's how I got into real estate. I was working at a real estate company. I wanted to invest in real estate, and Ground Floor was to offering fractional real estate investment to the public. And I bought stock with them in their Series B round. That's how long I've been with them. Almost, I think, maybe 10 years this year. Almost. Not, if not maybe 8 or 9, but almost 10 years this year. And so and I started in that manner. And that kind of got me into it to be kind of like, I wish I could do this. What else is out there? But then you go and start to look, and if you're not an accredited investor, it's really quite difficult. And that's only just now beginning to change.
well, there's three or four offering types in private markets, and the ground floor is going to be crowdfunding. And crowdfunding or Reg A Plus is for retail investors. So you don't have to be accredited.
Right.
I have very limited, I've only done one crowdfund because it's a
Mhm.
lot of work, but there's a company called Start Engine in Los Angeles um, that offers probably a couple hundred different deals. And I've invested in some of their deals, and it's all very early stage, but it's all just interesting stuff. It's just like there's one solar company, and they have like a solar powered barbecue grill, and the minimum investment is usually pretty, $500. You don't have to be accredited. So there's ways to get into it with the minor investment, and then Jet Token is public now. So I invested in Jet Token as a crowd fund in like 5, 6 years ago. I mean, you have to be patient. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's you got to, if you invested in Series B, most of the venture funds have a 10-year time frame. That's what they expect. And that seems like a long time, but life goes on. I mean, the idea is you set it and forget it. You just invest what you can and then forget about it. And some of them are going to be total losses. That's just to be expected. But the ones that win, if you catch an Airbnb or an Uber, they were like 2,500% returns for the seed investors in Uber. There were guys that made 500,000% return.
Yeah.
So, you're not, that's the extreme end. And then in the extreme loss. But the good news is mathematically, you can only lose 100% of what you invest. But you can make a lot more than 100%. So the math is actually really good for investors. The key is I added a section to the book, how to get the next Uber. And the answer is just invest in lots of deals. And not a lot of people have lots of money to invest in lots of deals, but that's the strategy that the big VCs do. The more deals you invest in, the more chance you have to catch the next Uber, because nobody knows at a seed stage who's going to be Amazon and who's going to be the next WeWork, which was a total disaster. So how do you know? You just do your homework and research, and you have a gut feeling. Does this seem like a really good idea? And but lots of deals is the key. And
No, no, I even do that in real estate. I have in Ground Floor the most diverse real estate portfolio because I don't like because the deals take so long to do. I don't like my money tied up in, you know, fewer larger investments. I like to keep it spread out. So I've got, $10, $20 on all these different properties. And it's kind of like, well, yeah, I have, 13 loans in default right now. I'm like, yeah, I also have 250 going. 13's not that bad. If I were a bank, we would be reporting on what a good risk management we had this quarter. Like that, that's like comparatively not that bad. In fact, we might want to loan more because our risk tolerance is too conservative and we're leaving money on the table for shareholders. Like that's, sort of thing. So, yeah, I firmly believe you have to go do a lot to find that one winner. So I like how you mentioned WeWork though. I thought WeWork was the most brilliant idea ever. I thought that was
well,
gonna go. I remember
Well,
sitting in my car listening to Scott Galloway and Kara Swisher say it was a dud, and Galloway's like, "Yeah, I've read the paperwork. This company is BS," and that started a whole media thing. And a month later, it was all done. I was shocked. I really was.
well, a lot of well, have you ever heard of Regis?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so I've always been a Wall Street guy, but I've never, I mean, I visited Wall Street a ton of times, but I've always worked remotely from very rural, remote areas. I live in the city only because I have a kid.
Right.
I like to live in as far remote as possible from people with internet, right? We can live in paradise and work anywhere. So I've always used, it's a company called Regis that I
Mm,
have an office in at downtown, and it's $200 a month, and it's just an address. It's basically like WeWork. It's a
right.
British company. I mean, they have 20,000 locations around the world. They've been
Mm,
around since 1970. Um, so people who know Regis, and Regis has some competitors, um, how were they going to compete with Regis? Well, how they did it was like free beer. But that's, I mean, that's kind of a gimmick. I mean, a lot of the things, but basically WeWork could have worked, but the founder was completely insane. Um, so that was a problem. He
yeah,
was
he was cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I
yeah,
didn't think you could get any crazier till Sam Bankman-Fried came along, and
right.
then we found out, oh no, it gets worse. Like, so,
Yeah.
and then I'm sitting over here being like, I've been in business for 10 years for myself. I'm a clean professional person. I've been clean and sober 10 years. I have my life together, all this type of thing. Give me $100 million. I'll find something to do with it. Like it's like you're giving a dude who couldn't get off his League of Legends game long enough to take your $1 billion, and you continued to do business with this man. You deserve to lose your money. Like if you
Yeah.
can't, like I'm autistic and don't like eye contact, but at least pretend to look at the camera while you're talking to me as I write you a check for ungodly amounts of money. Like it's insane. I don't understand how those two got that money from those people. Like
Well,
I don't. It's boggles the mind.
with FTX, I have a theory. With WeWork, I don't know, but FTX I think was a project, a CIA project to destroy the market because someone was behind Bankman Fried.
You'd be very popular on Twitter. That's a very on Twitter's very on your side with that.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this before it collapsed because there was something very unusual about how FTX came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden he's getting contracts from like these huge VC firms. That just doesn't happen. You know, there was something behind him, and also that doesn't match up with like Elon Musk is brilliant. When you listen to him speak, you can tell he has a high IQ. He's actually running these businesses. Bankman Fried can't even speak properly. Like he doesn't, it doesn't match up with the business model. There's, you know, he didn't invent all this design of this complex
Mhm.
infrastructure. There was someone behind running the show. He was just the lucky guys, you know, calling, you know, the peacock that they needed to show in front of TV cameras. Um, but FTX was super toxic, and we
Yeah,
were
Forex or not Forex, but crypto company slash sex cult. It's an interesting business model for sure. Yeah, it's a very difficult. I wasn't surprised about FTX. I'm one of the few people that's been kind of boo on crypto. And I was an early crypto adopter. I bought Bitcoin at $60 and I sold at 6,000. Um, and
congratulations.
well, thank you very much. And I didn't own a lot. I was working a regular job and I was just kind of like, oh, this is neat. Let's kind of see what happens. I did, a lot of new currencies. I did a ride with Solana, I did a ride with Ethereum. A couple of those. One of them bought my car, another one got me a move to the East Coast. One of them enabled me to leave my ex-girlfriend, like, all this type of thing. So it was nice, a lot of those things happen. But I realized for crypto, it's tulips. There's no, and as Warren Buffett rightly points out, there is no underlying value. Nothing is being produced or sold. No one's life is being helped. There's no real underlying value. Ergo, the only reason a price rises is because someone it's a greater fool. Someone else is willing to pay more for it, sort of thing. And I'm kind of like, hmm, that's a little volatile for my taste, and I got rid of everything. And I
Yeah,
haven't looked back.
I totally agree with you. I was always like that. And I don't know if it's maybe because of we traded Forex, but I always felt the same way. Like when you due diligence of venture capital investment, you want to learn everything about it, right?
Right.
You learn
Yeah.
who's the founder, where are they from, are they a
Oh,
scam?
I'm on their Facebook
And
page. I want to know
right.
who their family like it's
And so I started doing this about Bitcoin, and you don't know who created it. It's
yeah.
a big mystery. It looks like this other thing from MIT from 1994, and it just, I mean, if I had $1 billion, it wouldn't give me the warm and fuzzies that I would just, you know, there's other better investments. So I also never really, I actually bought Bitcoin at like $1 and then got hacked at Mount Gox
Mm.
and got nothing. So I just I never really did much with crypto.
Yeah. No, I loved, I mean, I always thought crypto as a currency will go nowhere, but the technology behind it will change the world.
Yeah,
And
yeah, I
I
agree.
still maintain that. And I think even with something like Ethereum, which is now actually used for blockchain contracts, I said, yes, that's what blockchain is good at. It should do that,
Yeah,
sort of thing. I think the other good thing about it is it has gotten the central banks to speed up currency digitization, which most money is traded in computers now anyway. Like
yeah,
we don't have a lot of cash floating around. In the pandemic, we had a coin shortage because people quit spending cash money and there was not enough coins circulating in the system for about a year, all this type of thing. And I think it has made that process speed up to where now and very soon you're going to be able to send US dollars to almost anywhere on the planet instantaneously through the
yeah,
Federal Reserve. That would have never happened if Bitcoin hadn't been quietly nipping at their heels, being like, pay attention to me, So it can be kind of like well, if we're going to beat Bitcoin, we better modernize some things around here. And it kind of forced the Fed to join us in the 21st century, which is nice. That's
yeah,
good for them.
yeah. I agree.
So yeah, well, this has all been very fascinating. Returning to your book, what do you think are the top maybe key 3 or 4 takeaways from people who are looking to get into it? Because a lot of people started getting into investing during the pandemic because the whole GameStop thing, which I thought was hilarious. I loved every second of that. Um, so what are the top 3 or 4 takeaways for people who maybe new and are trying to get into this sort of thing?
Uh, Anybody can do it. You can build wealth, but it takes time, and there's no shortcuts like GameStop, like crypto. I run into kind of two kinds of people, and one kind just want instant gratification. Like, I want to invest in a trading system and a cryptocurrency, and it's going to go to the moon next week, and I'm going to go on vacation. That's not the case. But over time, you can build wealth, you can save and invest. And the venture capital ecosystem is 99% real businesses, people like you and me. I mean, it's real people who are founders. And I mean, Airbnb is a great story. Um, they're all great stories. And there's a lot of ways you can get involved. You don't have to just be an investor. You can work in the sector. You can do a lot of things. So there's a lot of opportunities. And the whole market is good for the economy. Something like 85% of new job creation is created by startups up to the Series D or E. All these companies are developing things like, I mean, medical technologies, cures for cancer, just name it. They're all that's where real innovation happens. So that's an exciting thing to be involved in. So there's a lot of great stories and great people, the best and brightest. It's or you can
You
be a
just have to
founder.
watch out for Elizabeth Holmes. That's what you have to watch out for.
Right. What? Yeah. I talk about that in the book. It's basically identifying a scammer is like one of the, because private markets, the big thing that the disclaimer is that um, with public markets, you've got overwhelming disclosure. So I can find out what a CEO of a publicly traded company ate for breakfast yesterday if I wanted to. Whereas with private markets, you don't get any financials, you get nothing. If you want to invest in these companies, I mean, they're not required. Some of them may provide a deck, but they don't have to provide any kind of information. So you've got to do your own homework. So for some people who are not familiar, it's hard to determine who's Elizabeth Holmes and who's Elon Musk. Like if you're looking from the outside, it's not always so obvious because if you ask a scammer, are you a scammer? They're not going to say, yeah. Like the questions at the airport, are you a terrorist? Who's going to answer that positively?
Yeah.
So you have to learn how to identify a scammer. And I just made a list of like a bunch of 20 things how to identify. And that's part of due diligence. But there's a huge community. It's such a big market that there's a lot of people who are interested in it. It's very similar to real estate. Like you mentioned, real estate, it just hasn't kind of picked up in the same popularity, but it's a similar kind of market. The best investment, I always say, the go-to is rental properties because it's something everyone understands and there's always a need for housing. And that's the same argument for venture capital. That's the takeaway is there's always going to be a need for Uber and Airbnb. And I mean, these companies are solving economic problems. Uh, and
Yeah.
and
No,
that's
I
where
mean
where
that
the
no,
value is.
that's always I've worked in rental housing. That's how I got into real estate. Although I do flips, I don't do rental housing. Though the ground floor is moving in that direction, and as those investments open up, I will invest in them. Um, I mean, yeah, rental housing can be a great business, especially if you take a long-term view, you know. Um, and really, be mindful of no, you're not going to be rich tomorrow, but you'll do very well, your kids will do very well, all this type of thing. And I think I don't know if you talk about this in the book, but I one of the things I always look at, and this is another thing with Warren Buffett, I believe, invest in things whose businesses you understand.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I look at it something of like if you're a founder and you can't tell me what your business does in 10, 20 seconds, I'm immediately suspicious.
Yeah,
Like it's like what Airbnb, we help people rent out their homes and spare rooms to guests. Fantastic.
yeah, yeah,
You know, that's but it should be something like that where it's kind of like like this is what it is, and then it's kind of like, and then if I want to know more, I can say, okay, now you can load me down with scientific studies. Um, Point me to the PDF file. Sort of thing. Like, but I mean, I get very suspicious of people who say a lot but don't mean anything. That
yeah.
always my red flags start flying up to be like, well, now what's really going on, sort of thing. I get real suspicious. So, um, no, that's very interesting. Technical question, but might be a funny answer. On your cover, you said legal insider trading. How did you pick that? That's hilarious.
My lawyer friend suggested that because so insider trading is a little bit misunderstood. So insider trading is just simply when an insider in the company sells stock. And let's say you're the CEO of Apple or any company, Boeing, publicly traded, you're allowed to sell stock. There's nothing wrong with insider trading. But you have to disclose it to the public, and you're not allowed to trade on inside information that the public does not know. That's what's illegal. But insider trading is completely legal, and there's hedge funds that follow insiders. So if the CEO of Disney is selling, there's a hedge fund that's selling because they think that there's a reason he's selling. So just separating the legal from the illegal, like with taxes, tax evasion means lying about your income. That's illegal and punishable by jail. Tax avoidance is when you try to pay less tax by optimizing and expensing thing out. You can never go to jail for tax avoidance. The worst thing that can happen, the IRS can say, well, you miscalculated. You have to send us a check for $10,000. That's the worst thing that can happen. And it's the same thing with insider trading. If you're a founder, like for example, a lot of my sellers in private markets are founders. So the founder of Airbnb, Robinhood, they're all selling in private markets. There's nothing wrong with insider trading. Uh, they're just getting liquidity. In many cases, like Elon Musk doesn't earn a salary. He only gets money from stock sales. So that's why I named the book, because basically all these billionaires created wealth from nothing did it in a certain way, and they all use the same strategy. And I've watched how this works. Anybody can do it. It takes 10 years, but you can do it. I can do it. We can all do it. It's just that people, the question is, why doesn't everyone do it? Well, number one, they don't choose to have a plan and stick with it and be patient and do the work. And that's what these founders do. A lot of times these founders, they don't have success for 10 years. I mean, even whether it's Palantir, Airbnb, most of them are just struggling a lot. They work, but they work hard and they stick with it, and it works out. So anybody can do a strategy that the elite can do. It's nothing special that the elite has that we can't do the same thing. And
I gave up on Palantir and I kind of feel bad that I did.
I mean,
I
it's
had them for 5 years and the stock was going nowhere and I said, I'm gonna book my loss. I'm done.
the stock is unfairly punished because the Palantir founder is not popular with his kind of, he's controversial, and that's really the only thing.
Yeah.
It's a great company but stocks don't always match with a great company. You could
Tesla. Their cars are crappy. They get recalled all the time. The panel fit is terrible. The technology is immature. You wouldn't know that by their stock valuation now, would you?
right. It's
You
just
know,
yeah,
if General Motors had as many recalls as Tesla, there would be congressional hearings
right.
about the problem with American auto manufacturing. Tesla, on the other hand, has cars go out of control, kill people. They have universal product recalls. Hello, Washington? Nothing? Okay, that's fine. We'll be over here in Texas trying to solve cars that really don't belong on American roads. But again, the stock price never reflects that until very, very recently. But people don't buy Tesla for how good the cars are today. They buy it for the long-term potential of this is the car of tomorrow. They're buying the story. That's why I call it a story stock. They're buying the story. They're not buying what's on sale today.
Yeah, yeah, and anybody can do it. The trick is to try to get into Tesla in an earlier, before this amazing growth, and that's the tricky part.
Right.
But it's possible. That's what the book is about, and that's the takeaways. If you want to get into it, if anyone wants to get into it, take some time and read articles. There's
No, and there's
so
some
much stuff out
other,
there that
yeah.
anybody can do it.
Well, and even in the electric car space, there's some other really great manufacturers. I really like Faraday. They've had some struggles with funding and all this type of thing, but I think they might finally have it together. Polestar has done very well. Um, I wish I had a chance to invest in Rivian and didn't. I'm hoping Rivian gets bought by Ford. If that happens together, if I were Elon Musk, I would be concerned because Rivian has great technology and Ford knows how to make 100,000 of something quickly. That, I mean, they're already in partnership, but that together, that's a good chunk of the EV business, especially the EV truck business that just Ford would run away with it, sort of thing. So I wish I had gotten in on that one. But there's other ones. There's still opportunity in that marketplace where that will continue to be a dynamic environment for a while, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and it's
So,
always changing. It's fast changing market, so it's exciting. There's always new innovations, and that's the essence of capitalism, and it works good. Wealth is created, jobs are created. How
yeah.
many people work for Tesla, SpaceX, and a couple 100,000 people.
And they're part suppliers. People forget about that as well.
Right.
It's not just the companies themselves, it's everyone. It's every
That's the
person who
whole. Yeah.
does plastic for a door interior, does cloth for the seats, carpet for the seats, the people who mine the metal and transport it that makes
Right.
the car frames. I mean, it's all of that stuff
Yeah.
along the way.
Yeah. The whole supply
Um,
chain.
yeah, that is, and that's tens of thousands of jobs.
Yeah.
And now when it comes to all of this, a lot of people might complain that a lot of this just kind of increases wealth inequality and all this type of thing. Do such concerns ever bother you?
Well, what I've been saying, my whole thesis is that anybody can do it. So wealth inequality exists because, I mean, most of the people in venture capital are not third generation um, family money. They're founders that started out with nothing and created wealth.
Mhm.
So, like with SpaceX, Elon came to America with $5,000 or whatever. 50, even if it was 50,000, it's still an amazing story. But more importantly, SpaceX made hundreds of billionaires who were not Elon Musk. So, um, wealth inequality is a problem that should be addressed by including everyone, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do by saying you don't need any money. You can work in McDonald's and start saving your money and invest in venture capital, or you can be a founder. You can invest your time. You don't have to necessarily be an investor. So anybody who wants to participate in this, it's there's no roadblocks. It's all the roadblocks are in your mind. In other words, anybody can do it. It's like finishing college or setting a life goal. If you want to become wealthy, there's a plan to do it. This venture capital is a legitimate way to become wealthy because, people approach me with these scam deals all the time. Like I have a friend who claims that he can make 50% a week investing in some South American rainforest arbitrage scam. And, the
Those
venture,
are a dime a dozen, and
yeah,
they are all awful.
yeah, it's the venture capital and private equity industry is a place where you can generate real wealth over time. So everybody is included. It's not like an elite club of certain kinds of people. It can be anybody. So I mean, there's always going to be wealth inequality in capitalism because not everyone can be a billionaire, but the opportunity is there. There's not like a glass ceiling stopping people from going into venture capital. And most of Silicon Valley is very diverse.
No, no, I just wonder that all of this, I mean, I agree with you, but I think and I think the worry is legitimate that all of this stuff, this modern environment of financialization and securitization and how the markets and things work now. I think there's a legitimate and fair concern that maybe it's all a little bit predatory. Workers are being exploited for profits and money is flowing unfairly to the top. I mean, I think those criticisms are valid. I've written extensively about my issues with the way the modern economy works and all this type of thing. And it's just one of those things of in when I have someone like you on, I think it's, kind of fair to ask to say, do you ever think about it? And the answer could be no, don't care. I'm like, great, go with God then.
No,
Fantastic,
no, here,
sort of thing. Or it'd be kind of like, yeah, it does bother me, but there's money to be made, which is
no,
a valid answer too.
no,
No
there's
criticism. We're just curious. We're just on a journey of curiosity here.
no, there's my wife is Russian, and I've studied Soviet history. There's a book, Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution, that you can read that most people don't know that
That's very good. Yeah.
American bankers financed communism.
hmm
So
Herbert Hoover set them up in business by stopping a famine in the mid 20s when they were
right,
literally starving after the revolution. Hoover basically set the Soviet Union up in business. He regretted it later in his life, but
right,
yeah,
yeah.
it would have never
So
gotten off the ground without American money. Ironically, that's.
yeah, yeah, it's a huge irony. And so communism really sucks. Communism is exactly what you said. Money is just sucked out of the system and people are suffering. That's communism. So capitalism creates value. So the question is about wealth inequality. What's the alternative?
Yeah.
This speech, I don't know if you heard this guy, the Argentinian speech at the World Economic Forum, where he gave like a history of capitalism and what was the GDP of the world in like the 17th, 16th century. It's almost 0.2% a year growth.
Right.
90% of the world, or 99%, was in like abject poverty. And it was the Industrial Revolution that actually brought us out of that poverty and created a middle class. So capitalism, if you look at the whole system like a whole, capitalism is the best system we have to create a civil society that has a middle class that's more balanced and fair. The most extreme system that we know about that creates the most suffering is communism. And a lot of these leftists are arguing for communism, not understanding that it's capitalism is why America is better than Russia. Anybody who lived in Soviet Russia is not going to be advocating for communism because they know what it's like to go into a supermarket and have rice and beans and nothing else. Communism doesn't work. I mean, it's been tried hundreds of times. Uh, it breeds corruption. Another problem with communism, because you have central control, why did the New York bankers set it up? People are working and all the money is being sucked to the top, and the bankers were taking it because there was a guy from Florida, Armand Hammer, who's a billionaire that made all his money selling pencils and like shoes to Russia. Uh, you know, so communism is very bad in its output of. I mean, it's good for if you're the dictator, but that's about it. So what's the alternative to capitalism? But what we have basically is a mix. I mean, we have a pretty robust welfare system in the United States. We've got
Not by
this.
European standards, but yeah.
Well, yeah, but in Europe you don't have freedom too, so that's not good. In France, you've got an 80% tax rate. I mean, you don't want to live in Europe, believe me. I mean, in Germany, you can't homeschool your kid. It's illegal. They will come to your house and
Yeah.
put you in jail if you want to homeschool your kid. So Europe is not. I mean, Americans don't want to live like that, believe me. Um, so what we have is a pretty good mix. But as far as that argument, I don't think that those people are too informed about capitalism. I mean, the solution is people just should not be greedy. So if you're a billionaire of a certain caste, you should give away most of your money to philanthropy and help people. And that's the solution. And a lot of people do that, but not everyone is like that. That's the problem. You've got assholes are the problem. You know, the system works for most people, but you've got this greedy guy who just doesn't want to share. You
You're
know,
just talking about Peter Thiel, and we all know it. Like,
no, I was thinking of George Soros, but it could be anybody. But some billionaires create value, and some billionaires suck it. It's like Wall Street versus Silicon Valley. You know, are you
no, I
create
mean, I mean, to your point, I mean, because George Soros is kind of the most, as far as a lot of right wingers are concerned, the most kind of scary man behind the curtain, all this type of thing. But when it comes to, and people don't realize this, George Soros made his money on currency trading, very high end, sophisticated, large transaction currency trading, and an argument could be made that other of these billionaires are better because they actually started a business. They sell a product and or service. They have actually increased the GDP of the country, whereas George Soros basically fiddled with some numbers at the bank and got richer for his trouble.
sort of the true story is that George Soros was part of the same club of the Bank of England, so he had inside information. So he didn't exactly profit from currencies. It's basically a scam that he's running. The other thing that he does is he finances dictators and people die and people suffer. And then he bets the currency against, he's basically funding the revolution and then betting that the currency is going to collapse because he's funding the revolution. And he's
Right.
done that to tons of countries. So there's two kinds of traders. What venture capital is and what I do, it's a win-win. So there's two winners. In George Soros's trades, there's a winner and there's a loser. Like in the 2008 crisis, Goldman Sachs was betting against all these people that lost their houses, right? They made a bunch of money. So that's what we call toxic. So what I'm saying is that capitalism is good as long as you create value. And Soros is not creating value, he's sucking value. So he's betting against you. Like when he's making that billions of dollars on the currency, someone is losing. And when he's
No,
betting,
I was watching an interview with him about the British pound falling out of the ERC, which was an exchange rate currency system with the German Deutschmark that was around in the early 90s in getting ready to move to the euro. They were consolidating all these European currencies to have a common exchange rate to get ready for the euro transition. And the pound ended up falling out of it because they entered the system at too high a rate, could not support it, caused economic turmoil. And they
yeah,
had and that's it was kind of funny because in this whole thing, Soros openly talks about well, yeah, we knew what was happening. We basically shorted the pound and made a bunch of money because we knew the pound was going to crash out of the ERC. And so, and the scary thing is he did it in about 14 hours. That was the frightening part, is that whole thing came and went in 14 hours, and he made a fortune in less than a day. Frightening,
Yeah.
frightening. And the UK never stopped him, by the way. Everything he did was totally fine within their system. The Bank of England, I'm sure, happily deposited the funds into his account.
The banks own the government, not the other way around.
Well, yes, I mean that is, I mean, one of the things I have complained about in my writing is I said we have, the title of my first essay on capitalism was How We the People Became We the Corporation. And my argument was that we have this problem in our system where we have corporate and to some extent banking takeover of what should be people-driven democratic institutions, and the people are not in control. Um,
Yeah,
I was asked by a listener one time, she said, "You talk about who the politicians work for. Who works for us?" And I said, "I have bad news for you.
I do.
No one.
No one.
Me. Yeah, it's like I'm the closest thing
Yeah,
to a voice you have. And I'm,
yeah,
by the way, I'm not an elected official and I don't work in Washington. I write the Cameron Journal, and that like I'm the closest thing you have, but it's like there's no one in Washington whose interests and whose campaign financing is tied to you doing well. But every major corporation has politicians basically on the payroll. We figured out how to legalize bribery in this country. And so and so in that way, the system fails the everyday person, and it can be very difficult to cause any sort of political change within such a system.
yeah. You know what the problem is what we have is more like fascism than capitalism because you're absolutely right. That's the problem is that the big money has become a monopoly and they can create laws to make their monopoly stronger and the people don't have any voice and that is a problem, but that's not capitalism, that's something else, and that's
Yeah.
so
Well,
it's something
yeah,
to
and I think
discuss,
we're
but
we're a long way away from the capital. I think the cool thing about your venture capital thing is I think it's so much closer to what Adam Smith had in his head about capitalism. Adam Smith saw a small town with a butcher, a baker, and a greengrocer
right,
and a farrier. And I think venture capital, the way you've explained it in this, I know we've gotten way off topic. We're getting back to it. Here we go.
that's
We're
okay.
switching back onto the main track. Like I think the cool thing you talk about venture capital is it's more like this is how capitalism should work. This is what Adam Smith had in mind, of years you and me, Joe and Cameron walking down the street, be like, I like that business. Let's see if we can invest in them. Like that's capitalism in its non-corporate controlled static form. And
Yeah,
I think that's also why it's so dynamic. Yeah, there are winners, yeah, there are losers, but there's also opportunity.
yeah, absolutely, and that's why I like it so much and why it's it's great for anyone to jump into it. You muted.
I know, because I needed to take that phone call, but
Oh,
this is almost the end of the show, and I was muting myself to tell them, give me two
oh.
minutes and I'll call you back.
Okay, that was fun.
No, that's totally fine. That's totally fine. Just be kind of like, yes, out 2 minutes, just 2 minutes, because we're almost coming up to the top of the hour. But yes, no, I entirely agree with you. I entirely agree with you. So, yeah, no, that's perfect. That's perfect. I think it is a good thing, and I definitely I would like to talk with you again further, not in the context of the show, because I would like to do more of this in the next chapter of my life. I'm getting on in years. So I have to be able to function in my old age. So I'm turning 36 this year. So like I said, I'm leaving starving artists behind and moving into my artist with money era. So it would be fun to start investing in some stuff and making some stuff happen. So we should definitely have further conversation. But in the meanwhile, why don't you let us know where we can buy your book and where we can check you out online?
The book, we set up a website. It's called Unread Page. It's our independent publisher. Unreadpage.com is where the book is. And my venture capital site is vccross.com. Venture Capital Cross.
Excellent. Yeah, no, that's wonderful. And yeah, I definitely want to have some more conversations in the future about, see what we can do so that I can, maybe afford a small dinghy in a lake at some point. So I have no hopes for a yacht, but small boat. Like,
Yeah.
oh, all right. Well, thank you for coming on the Cameron Journal podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was fun.
That's all for this episode of the Cameron Journal podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Visit us online at CameronJournal.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I love to talk to my followers and listeners, so please feel free to get us on social media at Cameron Cowan on Twitter, and we'll see you next time on the Cameron Journal podcast.